So I'm very excited to introduce the two panelists that we have. They're both specialists when it comes to HR, when it comes to the situation in our region. So let me introduce you Bill Liu first. Bill, would you like to come up? Bill is an accomplished international HR executive with extensive international experience. He has worked in global gateways like Shanghai, Dubai, Hong Kong, and Singapore. He has over 20 years of experience, primarily in hospitality, and he's worked for many very reputable companies in the industry like IHG, Marriott, and Shangri-La. He really knows what he's talking about when it is around HR. He is currently the Senior Director of HR for HILTON here in Southeast Asia. Should you not want to talk to him about HR, you can talk to him about Ken Follett. He's a great fan of the author, if you've ever read one of his books. And he loves jogging in the botanical gardens 5 times a week. He's a very fit man. And so thank you very much for joining us this morning or this afternoon, Bill. Our second panelist is probably no stranger to you, Andrew Chan. He is the founder and CEO of ACI HR Solutions, and he's responsible for the firm's operation and strategic direction. He has worked in many facets of the industry, from a travel agent to airlines and in hotels. And he has made this work, set up his company, moved into executive search as early as 2005. He really knows what he's doing. You probably all know him if you've ever been looking for a job. And if you want to know what you can do, where you can find him, you can meet him anywhere where there's a triathlon. He loves running or doing triathlons, so he's a very fit person as well. So good morning, gentlemen. I'll just sit over here. We are talking about, this panel, as I mentioned, is the only one talent related. So I'd really want to start us with, before I do that actually, if you have questions, please, I'll give you opportunity later. We want to make this as interactive as possible. Bill mentioned earlier, let's activate our right brain side a little bit. We had a lot of left brain knowledge this morning that was inputted, and let's just, work our right side of the brain a little bit more. So if you have questions, please, I'm going to ask later, feel free to ask. So, a really coffee chat sort of thing. So, in your recent travels, what are some of the challenges at the moment that you're facing, that you see hotels are facing, or the organizations are facing at this current post-pandemic, endemic stage situation? What are you seeing in your regions, in the countries?
I'll go first. I mean, the obvious one is staffing challenges. I mean, in my recent travels, I mean, if I'm as a consumer, as a customer, if I'm going to a hotel, I obviously can see the operational challenges. So from check-in to going to restaurants, already restaurants are preempting I guess customer issues, because I can see signs on restaurants now in Australia, and I've seen them in Hong Kong, saying that, please forgive us for our slower than usual services because we're short-staffed. So I think that goes right across the board from rank and file customer service levels all the way up to middle managers and above. So I guess that's why Bill and I are here on this panel, because staffing issues is plaguing the industry as we recover from COVID.
Bill, what have you noticed?
Yeah, I kind of echo everything that Andrew just mentioned about, right? So when I go around, I actually travel quite frequently in the past 1.5 years. And a lot of people thinking that, during pandemic, you can still travel. And actually, Southeast Asia, we're in the advantage of opening up earlier than most of the other markets. So I was able to travel, not just in the HILTON properties, but also personal travel and stay at other properties as well. In general, I felt like, because the pent-up demand is gradually coming back, and then, there is a great sort of shortage of labor everywhere I go, and the service levels has a huge gap in terms of the expectations from customers, guest perspective, right? So there's a great demand of attracting talents to come back to hospitality. There's also a huge sort of internal needs to really upskilling the service levels for our team members, particularly that someone who is new to the industry. So, and the other big phenomenon I was seeing at this point is really because there are a lot of new refurbished and new properties and products into the markets, it becomes much more competitive now because everybody is recruiting. So it's good for talents that, you know, if you're looking for opportunities to move around, etc. But it's really bad for employers trying to recruit and attract talents to join them.
Yeah, I think we all experience that level of pressure at the moment, finding people and doing that.
Can I just quickly add to that, because I don't want to talk about data because you guys have all talked about data, but we also do an annual survey on recruitment in HR, and I just wanted to sort of share for this year. So we do something called the ACI report. For this year, when we did the survey, it's about roughly about 1,000 respondents across Asia Pacific in the hospitality and travel sector. About 55% of respondents from memory said that they were looking to change jobs in 2023, and about 58% of employers said that they were looking at hiring or new headcounts for this year. So obviously there's a lot of movements in the hospitality and travel sector. At the same time, the last 3 years, and we've been running this report for 10 years now, so even during COVID when we ran this report, we've probably noticed that 20% of the industry or 20% of people have left the industry. So that's the gap that we're probably seeing in terms of trying to make up in the industry at the moment. So about 20% have left the travel and hospitality sector in Asia Pacific. At the same time, if you think about travel schools or hospitality schools, a lot of the graduates or students that would have potentially hit the market in 2020, 21, 22, they also didn't come into working in the industry as well. So we've lost a lot of that replenishment as well. And that sort of reinforces what we're facing from a talent gap perspective.
Wow. And how do you see, let's talk a little bit about the initiatives that, you know, we're seeing in the market. What are the hoteliers doing to make up for it? You know, what are some of the initiatives you have seen in your travels?
Sure. So what I'm going to share is not just the strategies and initiatives by HILTON, because I think that, you know, we're just one company in this sector. So, you know, based on my experience and what I observed across industries, what do I think that works in attracting and retaining talents in particular? And I think that, you know, a lot of people putting a lot of emphasis on common ban, on the pay, because obviously, you know, hot candidates can get quite a few offers on the table at the same time, and they're definitely going to choose which one pays better. But I think that common ban is the hygiene factor. You know, if you have a low pay, if you can't offer up a competitive package, it's definitely going to be something, you know, fundamentally you did wrong. So you really need to up your common ban strategy. But I think that common ban is a little bit very short-term solution. For me, I think that what's more important is really a lot of people undervalue the importance of a company's culture. And I think that, you know, just one thing that I want to emphasize is a little bit, you know, I think tie in with talent attraction, but mostly tie in with talent retention as well, is that you constantly hurt people that don't leave bad jobs, but they leave bad bosses, right? Because I think that, you know, ultimately, for people to join a company, for people to stay on with the company, it's about their relationship with their managers. If they have a good manager, if they have an inclusive and respectful sort of relationships, I think that people tend to stay longer instead of being attracted by short-term increase of money rewards. So we emphasize a lot of things about how to make our managers becoming better people managers, right? Because that's really, 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 really important. And I think that, you know, I just want to share, you know, we did a live stream in China with the Gen Z last week. There was some interesting findings from Gen Z. Their expectations of good people managers, number one is it has to be an authentic leader. And what do they mean by authentic? Means that, they don't want to be lectured. Every conversation that they have with their manager, they want it to be to the point, short and sweet. And they don't want to hear all the empty statements. They expect their managers to be respectful, that they expect their managers to be an expert in their own areas, technically and professionally. And they want their managers to be inclusive, focus on their development, et cetera, et cetera. But if you see all the feedbacks from the Gen Z, it's not really unique. It actually applies to all generations. To be honest, if you ask me what a good manager is, I would expect my boss is the same, right? So I think that's just emphasizes how important a people manager is, right? My belief is, right, personal belief is, if we hire someone and someone is failed, that's our responsibility, right? So I think that, if we're just really focusing on building the culture, focusing on making the people manager a better manager, I think that's gonna help a lot than all the other, common bands, HR digitalizations, et cetera, et cetera.
I think that's an interesting question, and to reinforce part of what Bill sort of mentioned, comms and bends obviously is important, but what our firm has sort of seen over the last couple of years and coming into this year, compensation is always going to be, one of the demands from candidates, but we're actually sort of seeing that a little bit lower in terms of priority. So one of the first questions that we sort of get nowadays is around fit, and in terms of a candidate's fit into an organisation, because one of the first questions that normally would be asked is working environments. And working environments, as in the flexibility of the work that of the company, from a culture perspective, and also from whether they need to go into the office. The whole flexibility side of things for the last 3 years working around COVID has sort of developed this new workforce, and I know we're probably going to talk about that a little bit later on, but not everyone wants to come into the office, but also at the same time, not everyone wants to work from home either. So we also did surveys recently around millennials and Gen Z, and whilst we feel or we think that the younger generation want to work remotely, we actually saw different data around it. In fact, a lot of the younger generation actually want to come back into the office because they cherish the mentoring side and the experience side of working with senior people, particularly in our industry. So what we were finding is that the older generation, the Gen Xers and the boomers, they fell in love with the flexibility side of being able to sort of go into the office when they need to, and being able to work from home and spending time with family. But we actually saw that the younger millennials actually wanted to come back into the office. So we saw a little bit of the reverse of that trend. But what I'm trying to say is that I think working environment now is probably the first or second question that we get asked from candidates is, what is the working environment of this job that we're applying for? And then, compensation will certainly be question 3 or 4, but environment has probably been one of the biggest questions that we get asked from candidates.
I think that's really interesting, because oftentimes we, as an employer or somebody looking to fill a position, we think it's just about, I just need a better package. I need to present a better package to get a better candidate. But the working environment is a really, really interesting point. Have you seen any differences between the countries in our region? From what you just said, is there something that stands out to you, let's say in Hong Kong versus Singapore versus Thailand?
I think in general, right, there is sort of like a strong competition in terms of the talent landscape across Asia-Pac. But when it comes to specific markets, there is quite a bit of difference. For example, like in India, obviously, India has become the #1 country in terms of population. And I think that it does represents the sufficient supply of talents in the market. But the question is, how are you going to attract and retain key talents for companies in India? Because a lot of talents in India, because they are very international, most of them are wanting to have opportunities to work overseas. So how to retain the Indian talents to work in India, that is actually a key issue. And similarly, if you go to another market like Sri Lanka, for example, Sri Lanka is still in sort of like a financial crisis, right? The currency depreciation, et cetera, et cetera. So what I heard recently from a report is that 25% of the professional population in Sri Lanka over the past 1 year has left. And there are more and more people wanting to find jobs outside of Sri Lanka. So in that particular markets, right, obviously the talent challenge is a little bit different from, let's say, Singapore or more developed markets, right? In China as well, for example, even in primary cities, first-tier cities like Shanghai, Beijing, it's very hard at this point to attract young talents to come over. Not like before anymore. Everybody wanting to make their dreams in the tier 1 cities. But nowadays, people feel like, the cost of living is too high. I don't see a hope that, even working for 10 years, I could actually settle over there, etc. And it's just in general that after the pandemic, people's lifestyle and their life focus changes as well. You probably heard a lot about in China. There's a term called "tangping," which is like a lying flat. So younger people doesn't have that aspiration anymore, like older generations of sacrificing their health and lifestyle and just to really earn a living. So now more and more people wanting to just to stay in their hometown and just to live a normal life and to just really have a refocus on their lifestyle, etc. So I think that if you look across, as I said, there's a key principle which is still the same, is attracting and retaining key talents, top talents, but obviously there are a bit of variance between different markets in terms of their particular challenges.
Yeah, I mean, similar. I mean, all the major cities have probably got the same challenges when it comes to people. But if we're looking at this region, I think Hong Kong has been especially challenged, because not only with COVID, but it dates back to 2019. So it's probably been challenging for the last 4 years now. And what I've seen is a lot of talents, particularly at the senior level, have left Hong Kong during COVID. They've come here and over to the Middle East as well. So I would say the Middle East has probably been the biggest draw or suction of talent for this region. For Asia Pacific. So they've attracting a lot of talents over to the Middle East at the moment. I've seen a lot of senior executives in Hong Kong and even here that have moved over to Saudi, to Doha, to the UAE. So with their pipeline of new hotels and new businesses over that region, that's probably been the biggest catalyst of moving talents from Asia Pacific at the moment.
Wow. So I think we described the problem that we're probably all experiencing and we all feel every day. What are some of the strategies that you have seen work? So what can we actually do? We talked about work environment, we talked about comp and bend, we talked about talent retention. So what are some things that you have seen work in your own organizations or across the industry?
I think that I still want to go back to the point that I just mentioned about in terms of culture, right? I think there's a lot of people undervalue culture, but it's really, really important. It's really the anchor of everything else. It's very obviously, if you see the difference between different companies in terms of their culture, culture comes from the top management. It's not a bottom-up approach, it's a top-down approach. So if your company, your top management's expectations is all about spreadsheets, metrics, measurements, return on investment, etc., it is the culture. While on the contrary, if you have you work for a company that the top management is already talking about how what we do align to our meanings, our missions, how we're gonna, talking about people development, etc., that's a completely different culture. There's no right or wrong, but that's the culture of the company. That's the expectation from top management. And that determines the culture of the company. So I think that's really, really important. So that's one thing. The other thing I think that, as a company, I think, there is a sort of like, if you are a manager, how would you want to make sure that all your team members place their strengths, right? So if you open a new hotel, for example, you form a new team, etc., you want to make sure that everybody is at the best version of themselves. So I think that, number one is inclusive. You want to build an inclusive culture, because inclusivity, I can tell you, it generates innovation. Inclusivity generates collaboration. Inclusivity generates productivity, right? This is not what I'm talking about. This is all based on research studies and the data sources, right? So in order to build an inclusive sort of culture, if you look at HILTON, like our regional office, for example, South Asia, we got like over 20 people sitting in our regional office. We have got more than 10 nationalities. So we come from all different walks of life, different background, etc. And it's just that, it's such a gel team, because we strive for difference, and we respect difference, and then we work as one team. So that's really efficient. So I think that, making sure that everybody, you have a different variety, sort of people coming from different background of your team. And the other thing is understand each other's strengths. So what we did, for example, with our regional team is at the beginning of the year, we actually engaged a third party called HBDI. I don't know whether you guys heard about that company. It's a psychology sort of products in the market, etc. They help you to assess everybody's thinking style, their preference of thinking, and their ways of thinking and working, etc. So they use different color codes and to identify, you are more a creative bench, and you are more of a execution sort of bench, you are more this and that. So different color codes to combine to tell people that what is your preference in terms of their work style and thinking, ways of thinking. And we kind of like did that test for our team, and it came out amazingly that we complement each other, right? So you want to have a team that is really complement each other, not all homogeneous, everybody's the same, right? And that's really, really important.
And I guess I'll take that a little bit further from what I've seen, particularly during this period where we sort of need to cover a lot of gaps, and we've sort of learnt this during COVID, which is around sort of job sharing, and not necessarily someone in operation needs to fundamentally do 100% operations, but around strength-based talent management, if you see strong personality traits where someone in ops can be moved into sales or into revenue management, looking within. So I've seen organisations start to look within a lot more, because they were forced to sort of do that during COVID, where salespeople were moved into operational roles, and operational people had to cover other aspects of the department. And we've seen this a lot even before COVID in Australia, because with minimum wages in Australia, there was a lot of job sharing in Australia. So the front office person also covers for reservation, who also covers in different departments. So I'm seeing more of that as well across the region, particularly just this period whilst we're sort of gap filling at the moment. But I think multitasking and multi-skilling people in your organisation is great to have as well, because there'll be other downturns, and I think being able to move people within departments, but having it structured, working with your HR to actually structure that multi-skilling and multitasking is something I'm seeing a lot more of, particularly just this period where we are gap filling.
Yeah, I just want to add on that point. I probably lost the track of thoughts already, because I was thinking about attracting talents perspective, right? Particularly for commercial, right? I do think that this industry needs to bring in new skill sets, because otherwise you're gonna, using a very bad term, recycling of people that's from one company to another. People just go around, and then just within this network, and you don't get new blood into it. So more increasingly, I have seen that hotels and travel companies are starting to look at, particularly on the commercial side, of talents from other industries. Not necessarily some industries that are adjacent, to hospitality, retail, etc. I've also seen a lot of hotels that are currently looking at people from banking, for example. But it's really depending on what is important is that you need to be responsible to make sure that you assimilate the talent from other industries well into hospitality. So your integration and assimilation process has to be really robust and making sure that people feel embraced and the easy step to ease in, and then they can accelerate.
That's such a good point, though, because we don't see enough of that. Because obviously, in my job and what we do, working with clients, you present 3 CVs, and ideally they want someone that's worked in that industry. And if it's someone that's from banking or from retail, it will just quickly get sort of pushed aside, and they'll take someone that's within the industry. So we certainly don't see enough of. I mean, you've raised a good point with banking, because I can tell you in the last couple of years, the banks have been basically stealing all the candidates from our industry anyway. So a lot of people from the hotels and F&B have gone into financial services or banking and, selling insurance. So we've lost a lot of talents to other industries, but we're not gaining any of them back.
Oh, that's really insightful. I think this whole recycling of talent is something that, certainly you may have even seen it in your own career, right? This is what happens. So it's a really, really good point. And how can we attract people from the outside, onboard them quickly, make them part of an industry where they can identify with? I think that is a huge question. Now, at this point, I'd like to ask, do we have any questions in the audience that you'd like to ask our esteemed panel? Anyone? No? Oh, yes, there's a question. Do we have a microphone? If you just tell us your name and where you're from.
Hi, I'm Peggy from Roomdex. Quick question. What do you think the role is of automation in place of the staffing challenge these days? Is this a permanent solution, you think? And can it replace the human interaction?
That's it's probably beyond my my expertise, but I think that when we talk about automation, right? Because I can only speak in terms of HR, digitalization, automation, etc. Right? I think that our industry in general is doing very bad. We are lagging behind compared to some other industries like high tech, etc. Right? But we are sort of like we need to embark on it, because what I see is automation. It's just that unavoidable, and it's also from HR perspective, it relinquish capacity, because if the process automated, obviously you don't need more people in that process, and it free up capacity for people to do other things more meaningful, right? I'll give you an example, like in our hotels, for example, nowadays that we have the security scanning system, right, for team members' entry, etc. Right? So in the past, we have a security guard mining that station 24 hours, etc. Right? Now we have free that resources up. Now we can have auto, security scanning, and for visitors as well, you can auto register and then auto entry, all that stuff, right? Key systems, etc. That's just really free up people, and it's really for productivity, process efficiency, mining, labor cost effective. That's all good, right? But I'm actually thinking more longer term in terms of the disruptions. I'm sure that you all heard about ChatGPT, OpenAI, etc. These sort of things, right? It's really hacking our lives at this point, right? I was on a panel yesterday at Apple, and we have a panel of technologists, right, talking about OpenAI and etc. etc. And basically, people said, if you really open the bottle without regulating anything, if you apply AI today to everything without any regulation, it replaces everybody's job. It can do everything. It has already hacked the language of human being. It can sense people's emotions through their language. It can imitate. It can. It does better than a real man. So if we don't regulate it, it becomes so disruptive. It will replace everybody's job, and it does a better job. It's just like I feel like it's just like in the 50s and 60s when nuclear weapons was invented. If you don't have a regulation, proliferation, right? Human beings are already extinguished. So I do think that's from a disruption perspective, I think that's the biggest.
Yeah, I just maybe want to speak to it from a, my professional, not just facilitator point of view, but I think for the organizations, what is very important is for them to really understand the role of automation within their organization. I think for them to have a clear understanding, what is it that you want to deliver with your brand? What is the experience? What is the customer? What should the customer experience when he interacts with you? And once you've got that, you build your automation framework so that you automate the processes that truly are superfluous at the moment, and productivity and things like that. But where you draw the line and say, we are hospitality, it's a people industry, people serving people, where you draw it. And I think as a hotelier, that's how we need to approach it. So the HR piece, I think, is a huge portion of any digitization process in any company. Because if you start automating processes without HR's involvement or talent involvement, I think you will fall flat, because you won't deliver the results to the customer the way you intended it. So I think it's a very much integrated approach. And this is why we also wanted an HR panel today. We need to involve HR in that discussion when we talk about automation, because we need people, we need experts. They need to help us find these people. The work culture is really important, and a big portion is driven by HR. So we really need to create that, I wouldn't say it's a silo, but create that conversation between our commercial needs and the HR piece and the expertise that these guys have and bring to our organization. So I hope that addresses the issue a little bit, at least from my point of view, Andrew. If you've got
I was just
anything.
going to add. I mean, if the question is whether automation would, take away jobs, from what I've seen from a short to medium term, the answer is no. I think automation at the moment is just covering the gaps that we have for the lack of people that we have in the industry. So it's short to medium term, no, it's not taking away any jobs that I've seen. In fact, what it's probably have done is created new jobs in the industry to go along with that. So same with digitalization, it's probably created new jobs. We now have jobs and job titles that I've not seen 5 years ago. So every year we have new job titles now. Sometimes my team and I will look at this job title, which we thought we knew what it was, and then we read the job description, it's like, oh, okay, this is something different. So yeah, we've got new job titles now we've not seen, 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you. Any other questions on the floor? Oh, yes, the hands are going up. So we've got two. We've got one here and then another one over there in just a moment.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Maybelline. I'm from Crown Plaza Changi Airport. I just want to ask, during the pandemic, hotels were very fast to retrench people. Has that actually impacted your hiring skills, that hotel has got no stability in case another pandemic is going to happen? And how are you going to actually assure potential people to work back in the hotel?
That's a loaded question.
That is a tough one. But before I hand it over to you, because you're the employer, I don't think it was just our industry, but obviously that obviously is one of the common issues that we've heard in terms of attracting people back into the industry. So from what I've seen, running a recruitment firm, speaking to people that have left the industry, that is a common theme. And also students that may have graduated and didn't come into the industry. Their big fear now is, well, what if there's another pandemic? What if something else happens? Because there is that instability. For us, I guess only time would heal that confidence, because I think as much as retrenchments happen, I also at the same time think there are great opportunities in the travel and hospitality sectors, and we are hiring in droves again. So whilst that happened, I like to think that is a once in a generation event in terms of that sort of scale. But I think, time would heal that wound, and just with everything that's happening now around travel and travel boom, there are going to be a lot of jobs coming back into the industry. I think young people are going to see that as well. They're going to progress in the industry, and I think, time is probably going to be the best healer for that concern. That's my opinion on it.
I agree everything what you said. I think that, it's really unfortunate, to be honest, during the pandemic, because if you think about it, hospitality was really on the forefront, right? We almost crippled. And it's a really prolonged pandemic nobody has anticipated, obviously. I've never seen anything like that. It's really unprecedented. So, but I think that, currently a lot of companies like HILTON, for example, is to rebuild confidence and reputation of our company and our industry, to attract people back and to say, hospitality is still the industry of choice, can still offer young people, a career path. And I have to say, hospitality is one of the very few industries that is purely based on meritocracy. No matter your humble beginnings, whatever you are, you can still make a dream and become, a very senior person within a relatively short period of time. A lot of times when I talk to candidates, especially fresh grads, and they were saying, the IT company offered me a job as a programmer, whatever. It's a bigger salary than you guys, and you guys are frontline jobs, etc., servicing others, etc. So I prefer to work for another company, getting better pay, white collar office job, etc. And I said, you're not looking longer term, right? If you think about 10 years later, you're probably going to still sitting behind that desk as a programmer. But 10 years later, if you're doing good in hospitality, you can become a general manager. So I guess that we just need, in general, we need to collaborate and to really build the confidence of hospitality together, to tell our stories, right? To tell that how your career is going to be accelerated and how rewarding it is. It's not just about next job and working in housekeeping, the next job in front office, the pay that you get at this point, etc. It's looking a little bit longer term.
Excellent. Then we had one more question over there.
Yes, hello, good afternoon. My name is Jessica, I'm with the West in Singapore. I'm also a women's ambassador for Marriott in Singapore. So obviously, I'm gonna have to ask you a diversity hire question. No pressure. But what is the gap that you see that needs to be filled to place women in higher leadership roles or convince key stakeholders to take a risk on female leadership?
We're working, well, I mean, it's an interesting one because obviously a lot of the multinational companies have identified that gap and have actually got efforts in place, and Bill can probably share that, I'm sure you do at HILTON. But I know some of the other organisations that we work with have an unofficial quota system, I guess, in terms of what they want to achieve in terms of female general managers and diversity targets that they're hitting. So I think that is something that they're addressing and looking at. I'm going to pass that ball over to Bill.
I think that's a couple of things, right? Number one is the top management has really have to really think that diversity is not something good to have. It is actually an integral part of our people strategy. And particularly, for example, I can explain at HILTON as well, right? We are really put the gender diversity at the heart of everything we do. I can tell you from our nomination of, people to join our signature leadership development program into GMs, into our ESCOM team members, etc. We emphasize that the nominees that come out from the hotel needs to have a gender balance. right? Every time there's a leadership development program, we need to see, how many percentage of these nominees are female, and how many are male, right? And then we will forcefully to reject or turn down if the diversity target is not being set, because we need to constantly driving for it. And I have to say, we do have targets that what Andrew talked about in terms of how many female representations in the GMs, how many female representations in the corporate leadership teams, et cetera, et cetera. The reason why we set targets is because we believe that if you don't set targets, nothing get measured, nothing get achieved. So we want to make sure that's really on top of everybody's KPI, so to speak, and it's the organization's goal. So that's number one. Number two is, I think that it's really coming back to female talents themselves in terms of their confidence level. Because we had done a lot of focus group studies and gathering our female talents together and to talk about their careers and their concerns and the barriers, etc. And we got from the feedback is that a lot of female talents in general, I'm just generalizing it, is that they don't feel confident. When it comes to opportunities, they don't really raise up their hands. While compared to male candidates, they're more adventurous, they're more confident. Even though that maybe they can't do the job, but they are more adventurous. They raise out their hand. But for female, it's a little bit less because of gender difference. So one of the things that we're trying to do is to build their confidence. So we have launched a program called Women in Leadership, and I'm one of the mentor to have a male mentor for females. I think that's just to give different perspective. And all of times is really helping them to understand their strengths and to help them to build their confidence. So once they have got more confidence, then when it comes to interview, when it comes to presentation, etc., they become better. The females become better. So that when I got choices of selecting candidates, they got more chances. The final point that I want to make is it's not a target, but for us, we are really doing it very rigorously, is that even that when we present candidates, we want to make sure there is a diverse pool of talents. So for example, if we have a GM vacancy, etc., we want to make sure that, if your pool of talents that you shortlist is only male, then that's wrong. So we need to make sure that there's a female candidate in there, right? And when it comes to, it's not just about shortlisting candidates, but also the panel of interviewers. We want to make sure there is a gender diversity over there. So we want to make sure there's at least a female interviewers in the selection process as well. So we are making every conscious decisions and making sure there is female representations on every decision makings, and particularly when it comes to promotions and appointments.
But that's an interesting one, because even in my observation, when we see candidates apply for jobs and we put them forward, kind of to Bill's point, and again generalizing, so don't hate me men, male candidates normally apply for a job when they're about 80% ready, because they think that's their next career progression. But female candidates would apply for a job when they're about 120% ready, so they're overcooked.
Absolutely.
So a lot of times we would say that the hiring managers, the female candidates are actually the better candidates because they're certainly more than ready for that role. So it goes to your point about applying for it, applying for that job and having the confidence to do it because you are ready.
Yeah, I so agree with what you said, and I love the point, because I think there are two parts to it: organizationally, what you're setting up to do and the measurements that you put in place. And then for us women, I think we need to work on being ready and having that confidence. So I work as an executive coach, particularly for women wanting to step into leadership. And this is topic number one, is communication and confidence. And I think that is a big part of it. We need to really learn to step into these roles so that we know how to speak up and to have our voice heard in these leadership situations. So I think there are a couple of parts to it, but a lot of it has to, for us women, we have to seek mentorship, we have to seek coaching, in a sense, for us to really be able to contribute at that level with confidence. So I really love that question. Thank you so much for that. All right, we are running out of time, but because we have a broad, a spectrum of audience here. Some of you are independent hoteliers, smaller chains. Some of you obviously come from very big companies. 30 seconds each, please. What are the key takeaways? What are the things that you would recommend as a priority for our audience from a HR point of view right now?
Whilst we're talking about obviously talent gaps and looking external in terms of attracting people in the industry, I would probably say retention, because without looking after what you already have in your team and your staff, it's going to be a vicious cycle of replacing them. So, just make sure you have a good retention strategy. Make sure that you look after the people that's already in your organisation, in addition to your talent acquisition strategies.
Yeah, I would say, still culture, focusing on building your culture, focusing on upskill your people managers, and focus on also on your talents retention. And the talent retention is about, the point that you made is, we oftentimes are waiting for people to get 100% ready to promote them. But actually, in this war of talents, I think in the current landscape, you don't have to wait 100%, I can tell you, right? Because otherwise the people are already gone. If people are 70% ready, you need to take the risk of promoting them and trust them. And I think that, oftentimes you will see miracles.
Amazing. On that really high note, I'm glad we could end the panel on this one. I hope you took something away from this today for your own organization. If you have more questions, please approach either one of the gentlemen or any of us throughout the day. We're more than happy to answer any questions you might have. And with that, thank you very much, Andrew and Bill. It's been really good to talk to you. Thank you.